Thank you very much, Aaron, and good morning to everyone. You will have to forgive me. I came here sick. I came back from New York last night, but since I promised that I would be here and I'm losing my voice, I'll do my best. Our discussion yesterday and today revolved around the unfinished business of the 21st century, 80 years after the beginning of the largest theft and the most brutal and well-organized theft in history, 20 years after the groundbreaking international conference held in Washington by 44 countries and many more cultural institutions who committed themselves to the Washington principles, I can say today that some progress has been made, but we're still left with the bulk of the problem. Over 100,000 works of looted art are still scattered in museums and private collections in Europe and in the United States, and we can fairly assume that those works belonged to Jews. It may be worth our while to go back in time and remember that already in 1943, at the height of war, the Allies got together in London, and in the face of the proportions of the theft, they decided on the principle of restoring properties to their owners. We assess the number of stolen goods in the millions, around 600,000 pieces of art, and if we add books and Judaica and furniture and jewelry and silverware and porcelain and other beautiful things, we speak of millions of cultural objects. After the war, some of the pieces of art were returned to individuals, mainly big collectors, and in fact, the museum's man, whom I do not have to present here today, returned some 5 million pieces or objects, but in view of the real difficulties, the Allies decided to return the art to the countries of origin. For years, we all know that the attitude of these countries was that the country from which the art was taken is the lair of its citizens. Nothing was really done to find the owners, and I speak nothing was really done objectively or practically or actively to find the owners or their heirs. So on December 3, 1998, confronted with the fact that so much art stolen by the Nazis had not been returned, 44 nations agreed to the Washington Principles, a treaty of sorts that committed its signers to making the best efforts to return the looted art. The statement includes 11 principles. Briefly, these are that the art stolen or confiscated by the Nazis should be identified, first of all. This, of course, through provenance research. That archives and records should be open and made available to researchers. That the resources should be made available for this work, and that every effort should be made to publicize art that is found. All this in order to encourage owners to come forward and make known their claims. If owners or their heirs are identified, steps should be taken expeditiously, so it's said, to achieve a just and fair solution. Nations are encouraged to develop national processes to implement these principles. Following the Washington Conference, subsequent conferences took place in Vilnius in 2000. This is where we met, Aaron and I, in Prague in 2009, where the Theresian Declaration and the best practices were adopted. In Prague again in 2011, and an organization was even formed, a European organization, some of you may remember, ESLI, that worked for a couple of years and for lack of funds was closed down. The European Council also adopted a resolution in 1999 which asked the parliaments of member states to find ways to restore properties looted from the Jews, and I do stress the fact that It spoke about properties looted from the Jews during World War II to their owners. Now the Gurlitt collection, and you all know that we have now part of this collection in Jerusalem. The Gurlitt collection, which was uncovered somehow by mistake in 2012, focused again the attention of the world on the subject and placed the item again on the international agenda. One can say, without any doubt, that impressive strides have been made since, certainly in the past few years. In Austria, we know that about 33,000 objects, is that mine? In Austria, we know that some, I actually couldn't find it.
It's there. It's over there. I'm always so free.
In Austria, we know that some 33,000 objects had been looted. In 1996, before the Washington Conference, the Austrian government organized an auction of thousands of objects which had been housed at the Mauerbach convent, known as the Mauerbach collection. The collection was sold for $14.4 million, 85% of which went to the Jewish community, and the Jewish community gave out about $1,000 to Holocaust survivors that were still there. And that is one way of dealing with the issue, probably not the best one, because as it turns out, the collection was sold before anyone made any effort to find the owners, and basically after the collection was sold, some of the owners came up. Subsequently also, the Austrian government created a fund for the compensation of Nazi victims, and that fund published on its website the works of art whose owners are still missing. In Germany, the Bundestag passed over the years many laws regarding compensation on physical health damages, properties, lost liberty, but all of them with a time limit. In 1990, it passed a law meant to restore properties taken from the Nazis during the years of 33 to 45. In December 1999, the federal government signed an agreement with institutions and Jewish organizations undertaking the return of goods to their former owners. And in 2003, an independent committee was created, the Limbach Committee, whose task it was to consider specific cases and try or recommend to return them. This committee, unfortunately, did not do very much. After the Gurlitt Trove, an international working group was created to do provenance research. Two Israeli experts were part of that group, and the German government has invested so far some 18 or more million euros in provenance research. It has created a foundation for the lost art, which works all year round with a budget of 4 million euros, and it has done a lot in terms of funding researchers. There are about, if not more, to about 240 such researchers in Germany. And another novelty which has been introduced in Germany, and I don't know that it is done elsewhere, is that provenance research is now part of the curriculum of the history of art in universities. In November last year, the foundation organized an international conference in Berlin, 20 years after the Washington Declaration, with an impressive participation of about 1,000 experts from all over the world, Europe, United States. I must say that my impression at that conference was that most people spoke about provenance research, but not really how to return art to the owners. To prepare for Berlin, we too, in Israel, held our own conference last year in October with the participation of the German Minister of Culture, Professor Monika Gruters, and we adopted the Jerusalem Declaration. Our declaration, which I will discuss a little bit later, was also adopted at the Berlin conference. As a follow-up, the German Foundation organized earlier this year a dialogue between Israeli and German experts. According to the German Minister of Culture, the German government has returned so far some 16,000 works of art. Some 5 works of art have been returned since the Gurlitt Trove was found. In the Netherlands, I'm sure that you've heard a lot about the Netherlands yesterday, but I would like just to mention that after the war, the Dutch government entrusted the task of returning objects to the Stichting Nederlands Kunstbezit. Am I spelling it correctly? Okay. Some owners did receive some of their works of art, but many did not. And that organization was subsequently closed in 1957. And all the artworks were transferred to the Ministry of Culture, and the Ministry of Culture in turn gave it to the museums. In the 70s,
and
some of these works were sold.
Excuse me, but they were also sold, I think Professor
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In the 70s, some of these works were sold, and the proceeds went to the government. Only in 1995 did the museums initiate a project of provenance research, and as a result, the government created an institution, the ICN, which is responsible for various claims made by the heirs. At the Berlin conference, some of you were there, the Dutch representative claimed that in the process of restoring artworks, the government should weigh very carefully the interest of the owner against the interest of the museum. In other words, if the museum is open to the public and the work of art can be enjoyed by more people, then maybe preference should be given to...
That's not true.
That's not true?
But we want to discuss it now, but it's not the policy.
But somebody did say that.
Somebody said it.
Okay, that's what we heard. Okay. France, historically, has been seen as a center of art and has been able, therefore, to project itself as doing much more in regard to the restitution than it actually has done. The historical figures cited are that 100,000 works of art were taken from France, of which 60,000 were returned immediately after the war. After 60,000 of the 60,000 works of art, 45,000 were returned to individual or organizational owners, and the remaining 15,000 were auctioned off, with still 2,000 works of art kept by the government. There has been little restitution over the years. The works are still in the Musée National Récupération. In the spring of this year, there has been created the Mission de Recherche et de Restitution des Biens Spoliés between 1933 and 45, headed by a gentleman by the name of David Levy, who is charged with the coordination of provenance efforts. The mission is under the Secretary General of the Ministry of Culture, which then sends the claims files to another organization, the CIVS, which makes recommendations to the Ministry of Culture. The mission, however, has very limited budgets. At this point, maybe we should note that France has, in fact, changed some of its attitude. In Vilnius, I remember very clearly, I had a big discussion with the French representative, and I said, why does this work, which belonged to Jews, could you not give it back to the Jewish community of France? To which he answered very curtly and very abruptly, there's no such a thing as a legally recognized entity, which is the Jewish community of France. So I would say that over the years, the attitude has changed. I would like just to mention something about the Jewish world. Actually, the efforts started in 1943, still during the war, when a Jewish organization was created, the Jewish Restitution successor organization called IRSO, which signed an agreement with the American army after the war and received part of the Jewish looted art, mainly books. Some of those went to Israel. Another organization, the Jewish Commission on European Reconstruction, was also created, headed by a very famous historian, Salo Baron, and the secretary of that organization was a woman known because she was a journalist, and she covered the Eichmann trial later, Hannah Arendt. The first list that was compiled of works of art missing was done by Hannah Arendt with the help of the Hebrew University. Today, the Jewish world has been dealing with this issue intensively, perhaps not enough to my taste. It is represented by the Claims Conference, which is recognized by the German government as the successor organization, but its mandate is only in Germany and in Austria, and the WJRO, the World Jewish Restitution Organization, which deals with this issue in Eastern European countries. The organization is currently engaged in negotiations with France and is really participating in all the international endeavors, including as late as I think last week when there was this conference held at the European Parliament. Let me just mention briefly the countries where no progress has been made. Hungary, which possesses major artworks in its territory and has not restituted them despite being asked so repeatedly. As far as I know, Hungary has been refusing to carry out the Washington Principles. It is true that some museums have done provenance research, but they have refused consistently to publish the results. Poland is a sore point, not only on art, but altogether on properties. Poland has largely ignored the Washington Principles. Works of art were confiscated in Poland from Jews who lived in other places in the war, including in the Netherlands, and these works were returned to Poland after the war. Spain is a special case also. It has not taken any step to fulfill the Washington Principles, even when the property of a work of art has been proven. I myself dealt with a case, not directly but indirectly, of a family called Casero who lives in Los Angeles. Some of their friends, after they thought that for many years a work of art by Pissarro, Boulevard Saint-Honoré, had been lost, it was found in the Thyssen-Bornemisza museum in Madrid. It is still there. For 18 years, the family has been fighting to get it back. A friend of mine was with the lawyer, had approached me at the time. I also approached the Spanish government, nothing to do. And finally, Italy, which started well enough by publishing a catalog of art treasures during the war, including those that belonged to Holocaust victims. In 2001, it created the Anselmi Commission, which made recommendations as how Italy should be complying with the principles, but the recommendations have been largely ignored. Unfortunately, there has been no provenance research there. Italy seems to care only about what it has lost. In Israel, and that will more or less wrap it up, 1946, I'm not sure if Shlomit Steinberg spoke here, but you probably know the fact that in 46, Mordechai Narkis went to Wiesenbad and we got some works of art which came to Israel, about 1,300 works of art, of which most of them were Judaica, about 450 were drawings and paintings. Probably one of the only institutions that has returned works of art has been the Israel Museum. I will hand you afterwards a brochure that we have made, and on the cover you will see a painting by Max Liebermann, which was returned to its owners. Subsequently, it was bought back from the owners, which is also one way that one can deal with it. But basically, For years, we have not done very much because there were no experts in provenance research, and also, to the best of my knowledge, no archives, no work no libraries and no archives. Lately, even though we have not had very much cooperation with the Ministry of Culture, we managed to convince them, and in September this year, we had a first course on provenance research with an expert coming from the United States, and over 50 art experts from various museums participated. I would just like to wrap up, because time is short, about what we have done. Because there is no institution in Israel, no ministry that has done anything about the art or the restitution of art. We have created a committee, a working committee composed of Holocaust survivors, experts from various ministries, and we have started working on it. We have, I hope, filled some of the vacuum, perhaps not enough, but we still need on that to work with the government when we will have eventually a government. And we actually, in view of Berlin, we held our own conference in October last year. Now, at the end of that conference, we adopted the Jerusalem Declaration. In it, we demand fast and serious implementation of the declaration. Museums should temporarily loan and exhibit works of art. In other words, what it is that we would like to do is a more and just fair chance, including publicity, for the owners to come up. But failing that, and perhaps in order to help that, and if governments will not be ready to give back the art to the Jewish people, what we are planning to do is to have those museums in Germany, elsewhere, to loan us collections of art to be exhibited first in Israel and then go around in other countries so that people on the one hand could see the art. I should really mention that what we're speaking are collections which are still in the storehouses of museums. Most storehouses don't really exhibit those collections. We would like to have access to them. We'd like to be able to exhibit them. And as I said, we have two purposes. The first purpose is to allow owners to come up if we find such. The other, I think, is no less important, that is education. We want every such exhibition to be accompanied by explanations of what this theft was, why it was, and why it should not happen again. So we believe that this is something that should be done, and we are going to continue to work on it. And just to finish, I think that something has been achieved perhaps 20 years after Washington. I think there is a consciousness. I think that some of the museums in the countries today know that there are other sets of principles, other ways of behaving, and if that is not done with the looted art, at least most museums will from now on look very carefully, and also art dealers will look very carefully, both at the artwork which is given to them and the artwork which is in their collection. So I think that at least we have to look at the half full glass and say that something has been achieved, but much, much more has to be done. Thank you very much.